This afternoon I want to talk a little bit about the Antarctic Treaty. Now, I know everyone knows in detail about the Antarctic Treaty, right? Okay, well, I'm done. Okay. I want to talk about a little bit about the political history of Antarctica, and probably the most important question is, who's in charge? The treaty, you have to put yourself in the perspective of the time frame. This was an international agreement that was negotiated in 1959. And sometimes when I do a talk similar to this with a younger group of people, they have no idea what I'm talking about, but you can remember what the global political atmosphere was in that time period. There's quite a bit of tension, particularly between the United States and the former Soviet Union. International collaboration and cooperation was kind of a foreign concept. And the treaty was discussing two significant issues. There was a significant potential threat for international conflict over areas in the Antarctic, and it was a unique opportunity for the nations of the world to continue a collaboration in science that occurred during the International Geophysical Year, and I'll talk a little bit more. But there are now over 200 different agreed measures adopted by the treaty, and they address the environmental issues. They've taken sites of special scientific interest and set those aside, so if you want to go in there, you have to have a permit to go into that particular area, so it's not disturbed just by anyone. There are historic sites that are set aside with a management plan associated with them. So if you go to McMurdo, to the Ross Sea region, and you want to go see the Discovery Hut, they're only allowed to have 2,000 people into that hut during a calendar year. That includes all the people at McMurdo and Scott Base, as well as any cruise ship that might get in the area. And you can only have 8 people inside the hut at a time, and you must have a qualified guide with you. Otherwise, the door is locked. There's a lot of those kinds of provisions in the treaty, as well as the Camelot provision as part of the system. It is absolutely amazing to me that you could get 12 countries in 1959, when you looked at that list of countries, to agree. Particularly the Soviet Union and the United States, but also Chile and Argentina and Great Britain, that all had overlapping claims, and to agree. But for this system to continue today, it's truly, truly remarkable. And people always ask, why don't they copy it? And there actually are parts of the Antarctic Treaty, especially the inspections and disarmament provisions in the treaty, that are part of other international treaties today. I actually was appointed, I was reading a report from a U.S. treaty inspection group one year, and as I was reading through it, it became obvious to me anyway, that some of the inspectors did not have an in-depth background of what they were looking at when they went to some other country's station. Of course, you have their list of everything their plans are and what they're going to do to look at, but they didn't know what they were looking at. So I wrote what I thought was going to be an internal memo about that, and the next U.S. treaty inspection group that went, I boarded an icebreaker in McMurdo Station and stayed on board for 6 weeks as part of the U.S. inspection team. So I got to be an inspector, and I've done that 3 times now for the Department of State. Now, one of the provisions in the treaty under those environmental protocols deals with tourism. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because we are all going to be directly affected by that. As I said to you earlier, The area of the Antarctic Treaty that it covers is any area south of 60 degrees south. So when this ship reaches that location, we are covered under those provisions. This ship cannot burn heavy fuel south of 60 degrees. This ship cannot carry heavy fuel south of 60 degrees. So the captain and the engineers have calculated very carefully how much heavy fuel they have on board, and they will be burning that off before we get south of 60 degrees. When we are south of 60 degrees, please, no food on the outside decks. You saw some pictures of birds earlier. If the birds come in, if you're out on the deck with food, and that bird comes in, you're in violation of the Antarctic Treaty under the U.S. laws, because this company operates from a U.S. company, so they have a permit from the Environmental Protection Agency to come here. No waste over the side. So please be careful if you're outside with a container with your coffee with a lid on it, please. Be careful with the wind that doesn't get blown off. No smoking on the outside decks when we're south of 60 degrees. There'll be a location on the vessel. I believe it's a small corner in that heavily used casino on board that you can smoke. Please be careful when you're out on deck. If you're pulling your pockets out of your parka, you're pulling your gloves out, make sure you're not dropping any trash on the deck that might blow over. It is illegal to dump anything over the side when we're south of 60 degrees. And I cannot tell you again about food, because these boys are much better at scavenging than you are, and they will come in and get you, and if they do, that's illegal. And they are well briefed. Trust me, you don't want a skua coming in, and if you've got something, they're going to hit you in the head first, and they're a pretty big bird. But please be careful of that. We will remind you a couple more times before we get to 60 South what the rules are, but we don't want to have any problems. This ship also operates under a permit that, because of the number of passengers on board, we cannot do any shore visits. You have to have 500 or less. We're slightly over that. We also don't anchor while we're south of 60 degrees. And unless it's an emergency, we don't even have a permit to put a boat in the water. So when we get offshore from Palmer Station on Saturday, they come out to the ship to do a lecture on the ship. We don't go in and pick them up. They'll come out in their small boats, come alongside. So if you're up real early, I think they're due to get on at 6 in the morning, but they'll give a talk at 9 and again at 11 in this same place. Don't know who's coming from the station. It'll be a mix of science personnel and support staff. They have a short brief, and then they'll sit on stage and take questions from folks. It was interesting on the last group, the person who got the most questions was the station chef.